And welcome in to another edition of the Mainly Hoops podcast. Today we have another best bet show on tap for a loaded Saturday slate. Conference plays in full swing now, so we're going to have loaded slates here from here on out for the rest of the year. Definitely excited to get into it this week as well. As for our progress, we had a really good week this week. We're now up 20 units on the entire season. So hopefully we can keep that going as the season goes on and as conference season enters full swing. We get more great games on tap. So that'll be more action for us. So overall in a good spot this week. And yeah, like I said, now we're up to 20 units. We were treading water there for a little bit, but now starting to bounce back and we're doing pretty well. If you want to follow along with our picks, you can follow along on the Action Network to see all of our picks. We'll log all of our picks as we're making them ourselves. And the account name is Mainly Hoops One there. And if you want to join the Discord as well, the link is in our Twitter and is where we'll add all of our plays there. So we'll have like player props, or if we have like late additions there as well. Like we'll have our main articles on our website, but if we have any late ads, we'll add them in the Discord, and those will be the only people that see them for the most part. Discord's completely free as well, so don't feel like you have to pay when you get there. It's just a matter of time, and it's the easiest place to put those instead of making an entire post for one play. So yeah, make sure to join the Discord so you don't miss out on any action. We're also coming out with t-shirts here in the near future. So if you would like one of those, DM us on Instagram and we can get one ordered for you. Those should be in early next week. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that. They'll be sold for $20 a piece. So if you want one, again, DM the Instagram. And now we'll get into the slate. Our favorite, well, not our favorite play, but our first play of the day will be Pittsburgh -4 at home against Louisville. This is mostly a numbers play here, as I have Pitt over Louisville in my ratings by a decent margin. I'd have this number closer to -6 or 6.5. Pittsburgh's, they're coming off a tough loss to Duke, where they struggled to score the ball, and they were held scoreless for the last 8 minutes of that game. So it wasn't too encouraging of an effort from Pittsburgh, but I'm not going to fault them too much here, as Duke is the number one defense in the country and the number one defense in the country on KenPom as well. So KenPom and me agree, as Duke is probably, they could be the number one team in the country, but I think they're surefire top two right now, them and Auburn. So I'm not going to fault them at all there for that effort. Most teams would go into that building and lose by a sizable margin. But Pittsburgh, they're now at full strength, as Damian Dunn returned from his thumb injury against Duke, played 20 minutes. So, and he's a key shooter for them. They were really lacking his absence, as they don't really have any top tier shooting outside of maybe like Brandon Cummings shoots it pretty well. But the backcourt of Leggett and Jalen Lowe don't necessarily shoot it all that well. They're more playmakers, and they're very good with the ball. They don't turn the ball over at too high of a rate. So they're very calming presences there, and they need shooters to get the ball to. And, they haven't really had that with the absence of Damian Dunn. So I look for them to kind of get right in this spot. And as for Louisville, they're on a nice run right now. I believe they won 5 straight now at this point, but I still have them as a fairly overvalued team. They have been better than I've given them credit for lately. I faded them here on Tuesday against Clemson, and Louisville was able to get it done there. They looked solid against Clemson at home, but they have been fortunate defending the 3 as of late. And on the season, they're in the 73rd percentile in unguarded 3-point percentage, which that's merely a luck stat. Can't really do anything about an unguarded 3. So, and Pittsburgh is in a good spot to possibly give them some negative regression with the added shooting that I stated earlier. This is a big motivational spot for Pittsburgh off of an embarrassing loss to Duke. And I think they're undervalued now that they're healthy. So I definitely look for them to get right. It was a team I was high on in the preseason, but I did have some concerns about their depth, especially with a couple injuries taking them down. But now that they're at full strength, the offense looks solid. The defense could be a tad better. It's a little bit worse than I expected it coming into the season. But the fact that the offense was kind of still playing pretty well without Damian Dunn shows what this team can really do in this conference. I have them as the number 2 team in the league. So with that, I definitely like Pittsburgh -4 here to get right at home. And now our next play that we'll move on to is probably the day, and that's Alabama -125 on the money line at Texas A&M. I really like them to get a road win here. A&M's coming off of a high emotional win in which they needed a huge performance from Zurich Phelps to win it. He had 34 points on 6 of 10 shooting from three against Oklahoma, and I would consider this an outlier performance for sure, as Phelps is just a 27% career 3-point shooter. I'm sure that 6 for 10 helped that out quite a bit. He shot 22% last year at SMU, so definitely an outlier performance. And they needed Zurich Phelps to win that game. They don't have any outside shot making at this point in time because they're going to be without Wade Taylor again, as he missed that game against Oklahoma, and they needed that heroic performance from Phelps. And like I said, their shot making takes a nosedive when he's out. And it just happened to be that Phelps stepped up and hit a bunch of shots in this game. And Wade Taylor's also only one of their only great ball handlers on this team, as Phelps, he is he handles the ball at a pretty high rate even when Taylor's playing, but his turnover rate's fairly high, and I only expect that to go up when the ball is in his hands more. And a defense like Alabama should set up pretty well against the offense of A&M, as they'll force them to be shot makers in the mid-range. They're going to play drop coverage against everything and force them to be jump shooters off the dribble. And they don't really have any of those guys, like especially if Hayden Hefner and CJ Wilcher don't get a ton of time, which Wilcher hasn't really gotten a ton of time lately, and he would be pretty useful here in this game, but doesn't seem like Buzz Williams is willing to play him all that much. A&M could potentially win this game on the glass, but Bama's a much better rebounding team than Oklahoma was. A&M was able to kind of crush Oklahoma on the glass. Oklahoma's 321st nationally in defensive rebound rate. Alabama's 113th in defensive rebound rate, so much better. Obviously not elite from Alabama, but definitely in a far better spot than Oklahoma was. And Bama's offense sets up fairly well in this matchup as well. They're going to be able to fire away from three, and that's exactly what Nate Oates wants his team to do. They're going to give up. A&M's going to give up catch and shoot threes at a fairly high rate. So Mark Sears, Aiden Holloway, and Chris Youngblood could have big days. I know Youngblood's been pretty bad since he came back from his injury. I think he's shooting like 9 for 42 from three this year, but he's typically closer to 40% from three. So I expect him to get right. And this is a pretty good spot for him to get right when he's going to get some, unguarded three opportunities in this game. Guys like Philon and Sears handling the ball, like potentially getting in the lane, finding Holloway and Youngblood for kick out threes. That's going to go a long way in this matchup. And Alabama's also going to be able to grab long offensive rebounds off of those shots, and possibly even out the rebound battle, which severely hurts A&M, as they love to win the shot volume battle almost every single contest, as Buzz Williams loves to say. But yeah, like I said, A&M was pretty fortunate to come back in that game against Oklahoma, albeit Oklahoma had a pretty outlier performance from a guy themselves in Bryson Goodine, who went for 38. But the shooting was able to give A&M issues in that game. So it took that heroic performance from Zurich Phelps, and I definitely expect him to, albeit he is coming back home. I really don't expect for him to, carry this team again. So I definitely like Alabama to get this win on the road, as they've been kind of flying under the radar a bit lately here. If you can get -130 on the money line, I would take that. If not, I would probably lay this up to 3.5. So that'll be the play there. Alabama -125 on the money line at the moment. It might go up if the news of Wade Taylor really skews the market there, but that's definitely the side to be on regardless for me. And for our next play, bit of a weird one. I really don't want to make this bet, but I feel like I have to here. It's going to be Cincinnati +1.5 at home against Kansas. I hate everything about this play, honestly, but I have to make it. It's a great motivational spot for Cincinnati. They're sitting at 0-3 in the conference, and this is a game that they desperately need if they want to stay in contention. They're obviously probably not in contention for a Big 12 title, but at this point, just to stay in the at-large bid um, conversation at this point. They've really struggled as of late. Two of those losses came by 5 points or less. So you could say they've been a bit unfortunate, but their offense has really been stuck in the mud lately. It just hasn't really performed all that well. But I do like how their defense matches up with Kansas in this game. They play a very similar style to what West Virginia does and what Darian DeVries likes to do over there. And they shut down KU at KU. And they held them down to 61 points. Um, and the reason why it's a similar style is because Cincinnati, they have the ability to guard everyone one-on-one. They like to stay home on shooters, and they can especially guard Hunter Dickinson in the post without having to double team, which is pretty key against this team that has shooters like Zeke Mayo, Shaq Moore, and Rylan Griffin to hit those spot up threes when teams have to double down on Dickinson. And Aziz Bandago, Cincinnati's center, should be able to hold his own on the interior, and that's going to limit all of those opportunities. And I wouldn't be surprised if Cincinnati attempted to, force DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams into taking mid-range shots, just like West Virginia did. They kind of sagged off those guys and forced them to win, and they weren't able to do it. I believe they only made 3 or 4 shots combined. I believe they went like 3 or 4 for 15 combined. So that was a big reason why West Virginia was able to pull that game off, because Kansas, they're typically playing 2 non-shooters on the floor at all times, and that really mucks the game up in the half court. And against an athletic defense like Cincinnati, it's going to be really tough to generate any sort of offense, especially playing on the road. And they're going to need a big performance from Dickinson in the post-up game against Bandago. He might be able to get him into some foul trouble, but as long as Bandago's on the floor, I believe his size and length can hold his own against the Kansas big man. And like I said about Cincinnati's offense, it hasn't been great lately, but it is a talented roster. And when they're going to be motivated, I like them a lot more in this spot. Motivated at home with a ton of options. You have a guy like Dan Skillings, Simas Lukosius, Jizzle James, and Day Thomas in the backcourt. There's a lot of talent on this team. They've struggled a bit lately, especially shooting the ball. Guys like Jizzle James, he's really struggled. He's taken a lot of mid-range shots that the best looks, and he hasn't been able to knock them down. He's also really struggled from 3 so far on the season, shooting a little bit under 30% right now. And a guy that I expected to come in and play really well this year, coming in from Bradley, was Connor Hickman. And he's a 37% three-point shooter in his career. And he's shooting just 25% this year. He's more of a bench piece now. He only plays about 10 or 12 minutes a game because he's not knocking down shots. But if he can come in, provide a spark, and hit a few shots, he'll be able to stay on the floor and provide a lot of offensive value for this team. Plus, Dan Skillings and Lukosius. And Lukosius hasn't really played well, but Dan Skillings is starting to get going after getting hurt at the beginning of the season. He had a little knee injury, had a procedure done, but it seems like he's ready. He's been playing really well as of late. And as for Lukosius, I wouldn't say he's been playing bad, but he hasn't been taking as many shots as of late. They're kind of trying to figure out who's supposed to be taking the shots, I guess. And, Wes Miller doesn't seem like he's completely figured that out. But in this situation, that's something you kind of just got to throw out the window. And they're going to bring so much energy in this game against a perennial powerhouse in the Big 12. And when you have motivated talent, I'm typically always going to bet on that. And the Cincinnati team, I think, can lock down Kansas for a good portion of this game. And we've seen Kansas struggle on offense. We've seen them struggle on the road as well. They lost to Creighton and Missouri early in the season, and their offense just looked very bad in those matchups. Like, they've had 3 or 4 different instances this season where the offense has looked pretty poor. And this matchup sets up for another one, albeit the Kansas defense has been a bit better as of late. They're actually 4th in KenPom in efficiency now. They were able to lock down a UCF team and Arizona State team that I'm not all that high on anymore. At this point, their offenses have been not so great to start the season, so it's kind of bumped up their numbers a bit. A 50-point win always helps in KenPom efficiency margins. So I do think they're a tad overvalued at this point. So I'm going to go back to the well with Cincinnati one more time here and take them as a 1.5 point dog at home. And for our next play, we're going to fade the team that's not stuck in the mud. They're kind of just dead at this point. The Miami Hurricanes. We're gonna play Wake Forest -2 in Miami. Um, I mostly this is mostly a play on Wake Forest, actually. I really like the direction that they're headed in lately. The offense is starting to get going, which is the main part here for Steve Forbes. They're like 200th in efficiency right now on offense, but their defense has actually been the side that's been much better. They're rated in the top 40 in defensive efficiency, but the offense is starting to get going because of the insertion of Tyler Johnson into the lineup. Johnson has allowed he's been running the point at this point now, and he's allowed Hunter Salas and Cam Hildreth to go back to their natural positions on the wings. Hunter Salas was running a lot of the point guard duties, and it kind of took away his ability to score and score out of spot up situations and hit catch and shoot threes, which is really his main source of offense. He's been able to turn more into a scorer that he was last season, as opposed to having the ball in his hands and trying to initiate plays and running plays from the point guard position, which is not his style at all. If you've seen any of the games, he's just not the same playmaker that Johnson is. I'm not going to sit here and say Johnson is fantastic by any means. He has his issues. He turns the ball over at a super high rate. But he is an explosive guard that can get into the middle of the lane and actually make plays for others, a trait that this team didn't have. And now they do. And Johnson played 38 minutes last game. So I do expect him to play a pretty major role going forward. And it really worked against NC State the other day as they won 77-59. And all these other guys, they looked way more comfortable. The guys like Hildreth and Juke Harris and Parker Friedrichsen, they're all secondary guys. And some of those guys are spot up shooters, but none of them are point guards. And Tyler Johnson being able to initiate offense to a degree is way better than having a guy that can't do it at all. So definitely a positive move there for Steve Forbes. And Wake is due for a ton of positive shooting regression, as they're shooting just 28% from three on the year. And a lot of that was due to the role allocation. Like Hunter Salas wasn't able to get any clean looks because he was always initiating offense and had the ball in his hands all the time, and was the guy that every defense keyed in on. But now you don't really have that luxury as a defense anymore. And Salas shot 40% from three last season. He's just at 29% this year. He started to get it going the last couple games. He got to go in last game especially. Shot it super well. I believe he made 3 or 4 threes in that game. And then a guy like Cam Hildreth last year, he's sitting at just 23% from three this year. And then one other one that's just kind of fascinating. Parker Friedrichsen was a dynamite shooter for this team last year. He shot 37% from three on high volume. He's sitting at just 21% this year. I believe he's like 10 for 45. Like, it's been ugly. He's gotten a lot of clean looks and hasn't been able to get them to go. But I believe there's some luck involved there. And I do think he's going to get it going here at some point. And you saw it last game. He hit a couple threes and really gained some confidence. And a lot of that is because of the new look offense that Forbes is bringing out there. And as for Miami, they're kind of just in a tailspin at the moment, and they look completely lost on both sides, especially on the defensive end. They have no answer. They don't turn anybody over, and they're trying to kind of help in the lane and take away the rim, but they can't really do that because they just don't have the personnel is just not good enough on the defensive side. Like, my key thing is, like, if you can't force turnovers and you can't defend inside the arc, that's a recipe for a terrible defense. And that's what Miami has. They rate outside the 300 range in KenPom. So definitely not good. And they just look kind of defeated, especially since, Coach L retired. They haven't won a game since he left. I believe they're 0-2 or 0-3. But if you can't win that first game back after your coach retires, basically because you guys are having such a poor season, like, he's not going to leave in the middle of the season because of NIL, just because, like, even if his team was winning, like, he would have stayed if his team was performing well, and they weren't. And they've lost 11 of their last 12 now at this point. They haven't defeated a power conference team all year long. They've beaten 4 teams outside of the top 250 in KenPom, I believe. So definitely a good team to fade. I would say it's desperation for Miami at this point, but I believe it's more of just this team trying to turn the page and move on. I'm honestly surprised some of these guys haven't entered the portal yet. Like they had their 30-day window. I don't think that's passed yet, but definitely wouldn't be surprised if some guys did. And they're also missing Nigel Pack right now, their best guard. So they're a little bit younger in the backcourt right now outside of Jalen Blackman. So there's nothing going for Miami at the moment. And this play, a lot of it is a play on where Wake is trending. So I really like to back them on the road here, and we'll take them -2. And I'm not really scared of the environment just because I don't think anybody's showing up for these Miami games anymore at this point. So that will be the play, Wake -2. As for the next one, we'll go to the WCC. It's two teams that are considered to be in the top 5 of this conference, and a loaded conference, in my opinion. It's the best I've seen it in its recent memory. But we're going to go to Santa Clara -3 at home against San Francisco. This looks like a revenge spot here. San Fran won the first matchup just a couple weeks ago in overtime. And a heartbreaker for Santa Clara. They lost at 97-94. But at this point, I believe Santa Clara is just a flat out better team than San Francisco right now. And this line isn't really indicative of it. It's kind of saying that these teams are equal. Maybe San Fran's a tad better, but I would completely disagree with that right now. And Santa Clara's offense has been on another level as of late. They're scoring from all areas on the floor, and they're taking care of the ball much better than they did earlier in the year. So they're really getting it going right now, and they're trending up, and they're super motivated. So that's definitely a team I want to back at this point. And as for San Francisco, they're kind of going in the other direction. Ever since that win, they've really struggled. They took a road loss to Washington State, and the defense has been pretty poor for this team. And a lot of that can be contributed to the loss of Dwayne Newberry. And he went down about 7 or 8 games ago, but you can see the defense kind of just falling off since then. They haven't been able to turn over as many teams at this point, and they're kind of getting carved up on the interior at this point. Every team is shooting like over 50 to 55% inside the arc, or closer to 60 actually. And definitely, just like I said earlier, like if you're not turning teams over and you're not defending inside the arc, what do you do well defensively? And it doesn't seem like San Francisco has a ton of answers right now. And Santa Clara was able to kind of carve them up inside the arc last game. It just came down to a little bit of 3-point shooting late in that game that decided it for San Francisco. But it was encouraging that I thought Santa Clara looked like the better team on the road in that game a couple weeks ago. And I expect them to be extremely motivated in this game to get one back. This has been a rivalry for, a few years now, ever since these teams have, been on the rise. Santa Clara they're coming off an overtime win against Oregon State, but that doesn't really scare me here, as people say, oh, they're going to have tired legs, as that game was just 2 days ago. But these kids are young. They're still 20 to 23 years old. Maybe there's some 26-year-old guys still out there with the COVID year, but not on this roster. They're young. They have fresh legs. They're going to be just fine. And they're, like I said, they're going to be motivated. They've had this game circled since they lost it. So give me the Broncos at home, -3. I kind of expect them to win in convincing fashion, barring they don't shoot 5 for 40 from 3. So definitely like this spot for Santa Clara in the WCC matchup. One final play that we'll go with is a bit of a weird one, a play I don't love to make too often. I don't parlay all that often here, but it's going to be a UConn-Utah money line parlay at +118. I like both spots, as UConn should be able to bounce back against Georgetown. And it's mostly me just trying to get a slightly better price on UConn, as their money line sitting at around -185 to -190 at the moment. And I like Utah in their spot as well. They're going to be super motivated at home, and it's a tough place to play in Utah. In Salt Lake, it's a super tough place to play. So Oklahoma State should be in a fairly bad spot there. They're coming off of a huge win that they desperately needed. But Utah's coming off getting blown out 3 straight games against top-tier Big 12 teams. So, you just got to know that they're going to be angry in that game, and they should be able to compete on the glass against Oklahoma State. They should be able to take advantage against an Oklahoma State team they're the bottom of the league. I feel pretty confident in saying that. So Yeah, we'll go with Utah and we'll go with UConn. And I do believe Georgetown is getting a little bit too much love. They've been great defensively, but I do trust Hurley and company off of a loss to figure it out on offense. They didn't have the best game against Villanova. That was a big spot for Villanova to win that game and to get themselves into the Big East race. So I do expect Hurley to get the job done here. And the UConn defense hasn't been all that great either. You can attribute a lot of that to 3-point luck, but you can attribute that to a lot of other things. I've kind of given in on my take that UConn's defense was still great. They've really struggled on the perimeter at the point of attack defensively, but I don't really think Georgetown's offense is all that scary. They're outside the top 150 in Torvik's offensive adjusted efficiency metrics, so it's not a team that I expect to take advantage of UConn's poor 3-point defense, as they don't really love to shoot the three all that much. And I do think Hurley is a much better coach than Ed Cooley for what it's worth. I don't love Cooley. I don't love the schematics from him on the offensive side. So I do trust Dan Hurley in a bounce back spot here. So we'll get that UConn Utah money line parlay at plus 118. Probably only a half unit there, as I don't love going to these parlays, and people should refrain from going to these types of parlays too often. But once in a while, you can kind of pick your spots here. So this is one that I like, and that's the last play that we have today. And so that will do it for this edition of the Best Bets episode. And if you want to see our full card again, make sure you join the Discord, as we're going to have, I'll probably end up with 5 or 6 player props that I like. And that's kind of been not the moneymaker. We've made money on spreads as well this year, but on the prop side, there's a lot of value to be had, and hopefully we can end up with 5 or 6 plays on a Saturday. So those are the only places that you're going to be able to see it. I'll post some on Twitter at some point, but I'll typically have late ads. So all the late ads will go on Discord. So make sure you join that. And again, you can find the links in our Instagram bio and our Twitter bio. And it's completely free again. So don't feel like you need to pay once you get in there. Um, and again, follow the Action Network at Mainly Hoops One if you want to track our progress throughout the season. And with that, good luck on your wagers, and we'll see you next time.